Villages have been a staple of Minecraft for over a decade, but they're only found in the overworld. So what if the villagers took a leap of faith and ventured into the Nether? What kind of village would they build in this perilous realm? And would they survive the experience? Well, let's dive in and find out. So the villagers have just arrived into the boiling wasteland that we know of as the Nether. It's dangerous, and monsters hide in every corner of all biomes. It's just not safe to build a permanent settlement where those creatures are. So if the villagers wish to create a long-term village here, within this dimension, they need to find a safe area. Preferably a place away from the fortresses, and away from the bastions, and away from any other place where monsters might spawn. And well, that leaves only one real option within the Nether. The lava oceans. Most mobs won't swim out there. Sure, the striders might walk along these oceans, but those aren't a threat. And as for the ghast, which could in theory appear, well, as long as the villagers pick an area within the lava oceans that isn't too open, they should, in theory, be safe from them too. And so once they find the perfect spot, construction can begin. So just like all other villages, they would have started out in their town centre, but since lava is, well, hot, and the villagers probably don't want to fall into that, or even be too close to the lava, it's very likely that they would build their village on somewhat of a raised foundation above the lava, creating just a bit of a distance from them and the lava. More than likely this could be effectively achieved using just 2 layers of polished blackstone bricks. Now, not only is blackstone an abundant resource within the Nether, but it also fits in with the theme of a Nether Village. And it is fireproof. Now, the primary wood that these villagers would use in their Nether Village would mostly depend on whatever forest that they were closest to. But for this village, since a crimson forest is the closest, they would more than likely use crimson. So this Nether town centre, just like all others, would have a bell. And it would be a fairly open areas for the villagers to meet up, to trade, and to just discuss things. Additionally, since this is a unique Nether village, a unique Nether block might be used as a secondary focus within their town centre. Perhaps something like the respawn anchor might work quite well for that. It is completely unique to the Nether, and so with the town centre now established, it's time to lay out the village paths. These paths will guide the villagers through their lava-filled surroundings, just like in the overworld, but with a few Nether-specific tweaks. You see, villages all follow the same pattern, in that in the centre of the village, there's a town centre, and that all paths of the village lead outwards from that point. These paths are straight lines with harsh curves that are semi-random. Occasionally, these paths connect, but overall they become less frequent the further and further away you are from the town centre. Also, along these paths, there are many small houses, a few medium houses, a few speciality houses, and sometimes there are even animal pens, farms, rather random decorations that just make their village their homes. So with that all in mind, the villagers would finally set to work, planning out their village by laying down the outline to their paths. Now, just like the town centre, I would imagine that these villagers would also have a foundation above the lava for their paths. Now, village paths are typically 3 blocks wide, and whenever they arrive on water, the paths turn into the relevant planks. I think the villagers would likely follow similar rules for lava. However, to keep the village safe from the intense heat of the Nether, paths might be made from crimson trapdoors instead of planks, because that would allow heat from the lava to escape into the open Nether, and thus prevent any instability from building up under any planks. Blackstone brick walls could guard the edges of these paths, making sure that no villager would take any unwanted dive into the lava. Additionally, since everything is just flat on the level of the lava oceans, the villagers might have built archways at each of the intersections. It just breaks things up a little bit, and adds some variety to the height of the paths. So this is what the village looks like so far. It's an alright start, but this is just the beginning, because now we can start building the homes. So let's start out with a small house, because those are one of the more common houses that we will find within the Nether Village. So just like the paths and the town centre, I would imagine that this house, and in fact all buildings within the Nether Village, will have that 2 thick blackstone brick foundation. Now most of these smaller houses tend to have a 3x3 area on the inside, and that applies to almost all village variants, and thus more than likely that rule would also apply to this Nether Village. So this first house could have stripped crimson stems on each corner, and then the walls could be made of something like blackstone, which is a very common material of the Nether. Then the roof of that house could be somewhat flat. It doesn't rain or snow here, at least it's not meant to, and so there's no real practical need for any slanted roof. Flat roofs are just more resource efficient. Also, because it is just so hot in the Nether, it's likely that no house in this village will have proper windows. Instead, they might have fence posts in place of proper windows. Some villages already do this, such as the deserts and the savannas, and it does work to provide some level of privacy, while also allowing some much needed heat to escape from the house. Now, as for the interior of this house, well, the villagers could decorate it as they normally do. Maybe a small pot with some local vegetation, a chest, and a nice warm bed. Maybe beds aren't the best strategy for the Nether. But wait, remember those respawn anchors? Perhaps the villagers could use those instead of beds. At least that way when they need to rest, they won't, well, explode. And respawn anchors are far more space efficient than beds. Moving on from that, the villagers might be able to construct their first speciality house within the Nether, the toolsmiths. Now this property was inspired by one of the common Plains Village buildings, the blacksmiths. But unlike the overworld version, this building version would be made of nether materials, such as blackstone in place of cobblestone, and crimson planks in place of oak planks, stripped crimson stems in place of oak logs, chains in place of iron bars, and instead of furnaces, smithing tables could be used, because not only do those just fit in better with this aesthetic, they could also be used in a practical purpose, for they, along with some other native nether materials, can be used to create some very powerful tools that those nether villagers might have been able to trade for quite a high price. Also, making use of the flowing lava from the ceiling of the Nether, the villagers might have positioned their toolsmith houses to capture that lava within their furnace stations, thus making tool crafting not only easier, but also more efficient. Then on the interior, we might again see fence posts being used instead of windows, and this time for lighting, there could be some soul lanterns hanging on chains. Also, we might have a few respawn anchors in the corners, with some chests alongside too. Next up, we have the second small house, because small houses are the most common type of building in most villages, so we do need some variety in that small house category to avoid the village looking too repetitive. Now again, this one is inspired by a Plains Village house, but don't worry, this is the last part of the Nether Village that will be even somewhat inspired by the Plains Village. So again, this house would have had the same nether differences, and it would have kept in that similar style of the other two buildings so far. So now we can move on to the medium-sized house. This house is, yet again, on a blackstone brick foundation, but this time it's much bigger, obviously. In fact, this medium-sized house is almost twice the size as those small houses. So for this house there are 3 sets of stripped crimson pillars, one by the front face, one in the centre, and one at the back face of the house. The walls are made of a lower level of blackstone, and above that there are crimson planks, with space for our fence window alternatives. The roof of this house is the common overhang A-frame style that we see in many different houses. However, what makes this house unique is that those middle pillars extend upwards, and they split the roof in half. There, soul lanterns can be placed, and the roof is given a design unlike any other village house, while also not being too far off that Mojang style. And then on the inside we have a fairly standard interior. So now that we're done on the housing, we can focus on the animals. Now, having life in the Nether is quite a challenge. There's no water, no grass, and not even a subscribe button that can bring infinite power to all life, just as it does in the real world when you press that subscribe button. So it's actually quite hard to sustain and grow the animals that the villagers are familiar with back in the overworld within the Nether. So instead, if the villagers wish to have any animals within the Nether, they're going to have to use the Nether animals. And luckily, there is a Nether animal that would help the villagers greatly in their Nether villages. Those being the Striders. You see, Striders can be ridden on lava, and so they would make a great method of transportation for these Nether villagers, who would be living on, well, a literal ocean of lava. Now, these Strider stables that they could build would likely need to consist of two, well, airlocks, in a way. Preventative fence gates that would allow the villagers to get in and out of the stables with only one Strider at a time, without any others escaping, because the Striders aren't exactly tameable, and they will just mindlessly wander around. For decorations on these stables, the villagers might add soul lanterns across the fences, or maybe even some arches by the entrances and exits for some variations in height. But additionally, in each village there are more than just houses and animals. We also have decorations. So in this case, the villagers might have created a pile of gold that could be useful to store the resources that they would have needed when engaging in trade with the piglins. This could also explain how they were able to get the materials needed for a respawn anchor. This gold pile would need to be very secure though, to stop any piglins from just breaking into their village and stealing the gold. And so more than likely it would have been placed in a locked chain box and positioned outside of reach without the use of their Striders, which those Nether villagers would have tamed, or at least have some control over. Additionally, a Nether portal might have been built within that village. That way the villagers would have been able to get back to the overworld, and so they could trade their Nether resources to their overworld counterparts. So now that we have the core structures, we just need to place them strategically across the outline paths to create an actual, well, village. And so if that's done effectively with the correct ratio of buildings and at the right volume, we will end up with something like this. And with some minor adjustments, those being adding a few more arches before the entrance of each houses, and wherever the path gets a bit too long with no break, allows for a less artificial feeling when wandering through the village. Adding some soul lanterns between each of those arches can also help make the village feel more ominous and Nether-like. It almost feels like a place where the villagers would have lived. But still, there is one more thing to build. The outposts at the entrances and the exits of the village. These would be large looming towers built at any point where the lava oceanic villages meet the land of the Nether. These towers would be a great place for the villagers to control who enters and who exits the village. And so with some final changes to the surrounding environment, we end up with a Nether village that looks like this. So what would life be like in those Nether villages? Well, let's hear it from one of the residents.
So, it was great when we first moved in. The Nether Village was a unique, fun and safe place to live. We did a lot of bartering with the piglins. We traded our gold supplies for goods and for hired help to guard the outposts. But over time, many issues rose up. For instance, us villagers, well, we aren't exactly the smartest. Many of us kept on falling in lava, or burning our goods, or angering the piglins. Not great things. Eventually, when our gold supply was running low, our relations with the piglins began to deteriorate rapidly, and they started to be quite aggressive to us. Soon we had no choice but to abandon the village. It was an unprofitable and dangerous venture. It was a terrible idea for us to ever have started the Nether Village. Those lucky few that survived returned to their homes with almost nothing to show for it. So today, the piglins wander around our old home, acting as if it was their own. But slowly, Everything is falling apart. No one's taking care of it anymore. It was a great experience to be in that Nether Village. But in reality, just living there was quite a challenge. Seriously though, life in the Nether was so hard. Like, how do the other Nether beings just do it so easily? There must be something going on. Some secret conspiracy, I think. For example, the ghosts. Yeah, those flying marshmallows shouldn't even exist. You know what? I have a secret. The ghosts. They actually aren't even from this... Wait, I think there's a video that perfectly explains the ghost secret story. You can watch it right here. Do it now. Or else...